Today I want to address this question of how important was Zen Buddhism to the samurai historically. I see quite a bit on the internet. I've come across quite a few people writing in, in publications in the West. Quite a few people claiming that the relationship between Zen Buddhism and the samurai and Kobudo is exaggerated. Now, I want to say that it is true that it is exaggerated to a certain degree. There was a kind of view of the samurai that was propagated in the 1930s and the 1940s, associated with militarism in Japan during that period. And it's kind of, during that period, there's a sort of hyper-romanticism that is propagated for political reasons. And it's during that time, the Miyamoto Musashi, the stories of Miyamoto Musashi are revived. That should be addressed and that should be revised and so forth. However, when authors and people online come out and say, no, there's nothing there, that samurai were not interested in Zen whatsoever, for various reasons, people making various arguments. I want to say that I think that is also an exaggeration to another degree that they wish to present. Did the samurai practice Zen? Yes, basically, yes. There are 3 sects of Buddhism that are associated with the samurai traditionally, and people in Japan whose families trace back still, are associated with these three sects of Buddhism. One is Shingon, Tendai, and the third is Rinzai. And in particular, Rinzai is strongly associated with the samurai, and so much so that there is the expression in Japan that Rinzai is for the emperor, Rinzai is for the general. This is a very old expression going back into the early Edo era. So the notion of trying to say that samurai did not practice Zen, that they did not visit Zen temples, and that Zen Buddhism had no influence on the development of Japanese martial arts, is quite extreme revisionist. And I'll address why some people might do that today. Some of it is misunderstanding, but I think some of it also has a agenda behind it. In terms of culture and so forth, proof of this relationship, I think, is if you've lived in Japan, and I have, I do, and trained in Japan as I have and do, it's obvious to you that there is a relationship between Zen and culture in Japan. It's obvious that there's a relationship. It's visible. It's to be heard in the language. It's to be seen in the things that we do, the influences upon how we do things in various Japanese traditions. So it's quite strange for people, usually I think writing from somewhere in the middle of the United States or Europe or something like that, who hardly ever step foot in Japan, if ever, to claim that Zen Buddhism has no relationship to martial arts or any other cultural arts, etc. Quite a claim. What's really quite a claim, especially when you've stood in the middle of it, especially when you've lived in the middle of it. It is quite ludicrous. Most of my training has taken place in Kyoto. In Kyoto, there is the expression Zen no Bunka, Kyoto no Bunka, meaning Zen culture, Kyoto culture, meaning Zen culture and Kyoto culture is the same. I think it can't get any clearer than that. So the notion that the samurai were not interested in Zen, that this is exaggerated and so forth to some huge degree, I think that is just totally unsustainable, especially when you spend time in Japan, and especially when you spend time in traditional cultural arts or the world of the temple or something like that. It's very, very unsustainable sort of argument. Why do online people get into forums, get into Facebook groups, and write books where they go to particular lengths to slam Zen, and some of it is quite virulent, and basically attempt to somehow explain away, 800-900 years of history. Why do people do that? This, I think, brings us to the part of this video where we talk about how there are many people in Buddha, particularly in the West. Although I've met a couple in Japan as well, who sit quite strongly, I think, actually, quite strongly in the spectrum of antisocial disorder, antisocial personality disorder. I think there's this, the sad thing about training in martial arts is that you will meet people who sit in the spectrum of that, and they do seem to really dislike Zen Buddhism a great deal. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to explain away some sort of persecution complex. I think there's enough of that sort of thing in the world. Oh, those people over there hate us and all of that. But these people often, quite a few of the people that I have met who strongly of this belief, who write strongly of this, when you get to looking at them and meeting them and talking to them and so forth, they're usually very, very cold individuals. They seem to be very, very interested in power plays and so forth. They sit very strongly, I think, in the spectrum. And therefore, it's not too surprising that they would want to throw as much shade as possible on something which is the opposite of what they are. If you sit in the spectrum of antisocial personality disorder, you know, some of the things that you want to do are manipulate people. You see people as victims of yourself. You see them like a food, like a psycho food for yourself to prey upon, etc. The last thing you want them to do is to develop themselves, to develop free thinking, free action with themselves. These are the last things that those people want to do. So, yes, I think this is one of the reasons that these people sort of go out. It seems to be not a coincidence that seems to be the sort of person who particularly goes after Zen Buddhism and goes after trying to present some sort of revisionist history where the samurai have no interest in Zen whatsoever, and there is no relationship between martial arts and Zen Buddhism. I think, you know, a terrible lot of it comes from people who sit in that spectrum and they have, you know, motives for that kind of dialogue that they try to promote in their writing, in their saying. As I said, if you live in Japan, if you train in Japan, if you train in an authentic tradition, I think the relationship is obvious. If you can't see it, I'm not sure what you're doing. I really don't. I really don't know what you're doing if you can't see that. Is everyone who's doing martial art in Japan or doing tea or other 100 Kodo in Japan, doing Zazen as well, going to Zen temples? No, not all people who are doing these things are going to Zen temples. That's true. Not all the people who have ever done these things have gone to Zen temples or been Zen priests or Zen masters, etc. But it's undeniable that there's a relationship. It's undeniable that many of the people who have been involved in these things, especially at the highest levels of these things, have been either Zen monks or the students of Zen monks and nuns at some point, etc., and do and have practiced Zen to some degree, or, you know, have some sort of relationship with the tradition. So if you liked this video, please remember to like, subscribe, go to the description, and you might consider becoming a member of the channel, a member of the virtual dojo, and yeah, thank you very much.